Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. I have a very special repeat guest, my man George Limen. This guy's like a fan favorite. I like to have him on every once in a while, but he actually reaches out with amazing ideas. So this is going to be a real treat. He's literally one of the smartest guys I know and one of the best dressed. So if you get a chance, go to YouTube and check out my man because he's always so dapper. George, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you so much, Tom. You always know how to say the best things about your people. I am always humbled and grateful to be here. And for the people I haven't met here yet or who don't know me yet, I am George Limen. I trained as a pharmacist, started as an MSL 4 years ago, and then recently switched roles and I'm in a different company now. And today, whatever we're discussing is just my own opinions. They don't reflect the opinions of my current or previous employers. So, really looking forward to an engaging conversation. And Tom, thank you again for having me.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, so guys, George had this idea of talking about, and the topic today is called identifying rate limiting steps and catalyzing what matters. And just to show you how smart he was, I literally like had to look up what catalyzing meant. I kind of thought I knew what it was, but like I had to look it up. But kidding, but kind of serious. Anyway, before we get into it and jump into this topic, just want to give you guys a final reminder to sign up for Fierce Pharma Week, which is coming up September 8th through the 11th. So when you're listening to this, if you listen to it after the fact, you might actually be a little late, but if you're listening to it when it first comes out, you still have time. Sign up for the again, first day is September 8th. You can even register that day. The thing is, if you use code MSL Talk, no space, MSLTALK, you get 25% off. This event is in Philadelphia at the convention center. It's going to be a nice size event. Used to be Mass East, now it's much bigger. Fierce does an amazing job. So, medical affairs folks and leaders, MSLs, and then there's other tracks in PR, marketing, business development, and licensing. So there's other groups as well. So I'll be there. I hope to see you guys there. Sign up, go to Fierce Pharma Week. If you just Google that, you'll get the registration information. Okay, George, you came up with this. So I want to defer to you and start off by asking, I guess, just to start by saying or telling us what is a rate limiting step and why is this topic relevant?
Great, great. Thank you, Tom. Let me start by saying I've been lucky since I became an MSL over 4 years ago, as I mentioned. And because of that, I make myself available to talk to many people who are trying to transition into MSL roles. However, in some cases, people reach out to me and I quickly realize they're trying to solve the wrong problem. They maybe be asking the wrong questions or trying to fix the wrong steps in the process. I have met with people who say, "Hey, George, I'm so frustrated with the MSL pursuit. I have been applying for roles for the past 2, 3 years, but no one would give me a chance." And sometimes jokingly, I ask them, "What therapy area are you interested in?" And some people don't know about therapy area. They say, "What is a therapy area?" I've asked people, what is the list of companies on your short list that you think you want to work for based on your interest and expertise? They do not know. I've had people who have come on the phone during my office hours that sometimes I offer on LinkedIn to say, "I really want to be an MSL because I'm looking for a job that I can work from home." And so I realized that there are different people coming from different parts, different places in their career, and they're approaching this thing from different places. They're trying to solve the wrong problem, trying to connect with me, maybe for a referral when you don't even know what the job is,
Mm.
really is not going to help because I'm not surely going to put my name in the line. So I thought and I said, these are some rate limiting steps. If people have challenges at different points, they have to figure that out. So your question, what is a rate limiting step? If you go to Google, ChatGPT, Gemini, You Google, you're going to find some variation of definition, but the one that I kind of want us to look at today is that a rate limiting step is the slowest step in a sequence of chemical or biochemical reactions. And this step dictates the overall speed of the entire process. Because if the reaction cannot proceed, because if a reaction has, so a reaction cannot proceed faster than the slowest step. So that step, what slows you down? What is it that is holding you back? So there are many steps, many aspects, many areas of the MSL pursuit that we can look at closely, but those are the things, what is holding your progress
Yeah.
back?
And that's why I was excited to do this topic because I think that a lot of times there are factors, rate limiting steps that are holding people back and they're not even aware of it. And I think that hopefully by the end of this episode, they will be armed with information that's going to help catapult them. You say catalyze them in the process to speed things up where they could start to see some progress because these rate limiting steps are holding you back from your progress and you probably don't even know what they are. So let's get into that. Can you talk about or share some examples of what some of these rate limiting steps are? What do they look like?
Great, yes. The becoming an MSL is not kind of a one-step apply, interview, and get the job. There are different things along the way, the number of interviews, the number of things you need to do in preparation of that. So I can think of several rate limiting steps in becoming an ML. This can include you submitting your applications, your resume, and receiving automatic rejections.
Hmm.
If you cannot go past this point, you cannot become an MSL.
Hmm.
If you have maybe a poorly written or generic resume template, you're using one resume over and over and over, then you're likely not going to have good hits. Or you don't have an identified therapy area. You don't have an alignment with your therapy area. You are networking without a clear purpose. That is actually a way to kill the whole idea of networking. You reach out to me and there's really nothing we're discussing in the 5, 10, 15 minutes. Or you just don't have an understanding of the MSR role. So there are people at different points in this. So we can go through like, okay, what are the earlier signs and how do people evolve? But the one thing for the audience to understand is that becoming an MSL has different steps. And you need to understand each step in a progressive manner and then identify what step am I succeeding in? What step do I keep having a challenge in? Then that will be your rate limiting step that you need to fix in order to progress.
And I just want to unpack that a little bit because one of the things that's really important that George said is that in your search process, it's not going to be one thing. It's probably not one rate limiting step. It's probably a combination of things. So by taking the initiative to make sure that your resume is formatted properly, that you're using the right system when you're applying to positions, optimizing your resume, networking, all the things that you need to do. It's not one thing, it's a combination of things. So you need to identify what your rate limiting steps are. And that may require some self diagnosis of figuring out what are my limitations? What am I missing? How am I limiting myself? So, George, how can someone go through that self diagnosis? How do they know what they're doing wrong?
Yes, I love that question. And I want to belabor a quote that has been used over and over. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different outcomes. So if you have been submitting applications for the past 1, 2 years and it has been bouncing back at you, then there is really no sense trying to continue to submit applications or resume. So you have to step back. If you are getting calls from HR and from recruiters, maybe a phone screen, and that is all that happens, then maybe you need to take a step back and ask yourself a few questions. So, how can someone diagnose their specific rate limiting steps without making assumptions? It is to go back to the list of applications, keep track of them, and see what always happens. again, the most common is that a majority of people never hear back after they apply for jobs, or they just get an automatic rejection. That is the point where you have to think the only thing you have done regarding this job application is to submit a resume. If I'm getting an automatic rejection, then my resume surely doesn't have the right format. It doesn't use the right language. It may not have the right length, right? So that is one easy way for you to say, I think I'm doing something wrong with my resume. And then how can I optimize how can I optimize that? And so that brings me to a quote that I came across by Socrates, who said, an unexamined life is not worth living. So again, that may be looking that can look very like a huge hyperbole for me to use it here, but we all, whether you're an aspiring MSL, an established MSL, or any other career professional, you need to have some mechanisms in place where you can look back at past performance, where you are now. Are you accomplishing your goals? So yes, if you are an aspiring MSL, and all your applications are getting automatic rejection, then the rate limiting step for you is likely that your resume is really not what the industry is looking for.
Mm.
And then there are different aspects that we can discuss further about different how rate limiting step may show in different aspects of the interview process.
So the analysis and being able to take a step back and evaluate, okay, what am I doing? What do I think needs to be fixed is an important part of this process, and understanding what the limitations are, what the rate limiting steps are. So you do this analysis and you say, okay, well, I'm applying to all these positions, but I'm not getting anywhere. So you have to make the assumption that there's something going on with the resume. And then that's where you jump in. What if, because as you know, we have a coaching program, so we do a lot of work with aspiring MSLs. If anyone's interested, DM me, I can give you the information. But so one of the things we hear about all the time in our coaching program is that we do often hear about when people come to us, they're like, the reason I'm coming to you is because I've had interviews, one interview, and then I never get a call back. So, what might be the issue in that situation if somebody's getting interviews, but they're just never getting called past that?
Yeah, so correct. The first interview is mostly a phone screen, maybe with an HR person, talent acquisition. In some cases, the hiring managers can do that, but it's mostly someone who is not into the science, who is just into people attraction, talent acquisition. So why will I speak with a talent acquisition expert one, two, three, and that conversation just stalls? Maybe I am not telling the right story. Maybe I am not able to articulate to them why I want to become an MSL. Maybe I did not do my homework on the company, and I came and I couldn't answer basic things about the company. Or just maybe I haven't crafted either a story of my why, right? Because when it's mostly those initial phone screen, that is not the place to come and flex your scientific nerdy muscles, because that's not what they need. So at the different levels of the interview process, as the candidate, you need to know what kind of questions do I need to prepare for, and how do I present myself? When I do a tell me about yourself to a talent acquisition team, it is slightly different from when I'm meeting with a hiring manager or I have a panel of scientists to discuss with, because I'm not trying to overload anybody with too much information. So if you have an HR screen, if you couldn't tell a good story of why, if you don't have an understanding of what the company does, or tell me a little more why you want to work for our company, tell me a little more about your experiences. It is your responsibility to make that person who might not know everything you did in your PhD, PharmD, MD program. It's your responsibility to make them understand why all of the information that you've gathered in all of your career is going to be useful to this team. So, really practicing the art of good storytelling, presenting yourself in a way that anybody can remember you. I think that's the point. So, if you're stalling at those HR screening, then You want to step back again and say, what are some of the questions I have been asked? How did I answer them? And how did I feel about answering them? Because I can feel, even on a phone call, that I answered a question to somebody's satisfaction. So, an interview process is not just you coming and talking, it is also listening and see where those conversations are leading, right? So, it really takes that individual introspection to say, I took this interview. I feel like on question number one, I had a good answer. On question number two, I was a little rusty. And on question number three, I actually had no idea. How can I optimize my interviewing skill for that talent acquisition component of the interview process in such a way that I can present myself as a candidate they want to advance to the next step? This is not the place for the science. This is not the place to talk about your PhD thesis. It is a place to connect with someone
Mm.
at a human level. So, just things for candidates to think about.
And what I love about that exercise, what you just did, and guys, this is what's really important. I see a lot of people that are in the interview process or even in the job search process, and they're really kind of just going through the motions. They're sending out a bunch of applications, not really paying attention to who they're sending them to, when they're sending them to, what version of the resume, why, how, no details. And then you go out on an initial interview and you're not as prepared as you should be, but you're also not evaluating, just like George just said, evaluating, okay, what went well, what didn't, what do I need to improve on, where did I mess up, why might I not be getting that call back? Because that's how you improve for the next time. This is definitely a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you can't just go through the motions. It's like it's taking these small steps, but improving those steps as you go so that you get better and better and better, and you're more and more equipped to actually get that job. In order to compete against the other people, keep in mind, if you're interviewing, there's plenty of other people interviewing. How do you stand out versus those people? So, George, let's take this one step further. Let's just say that somebody gets into the interview process and now they start meeting with hiring managers, but then maybe they're not hearing back. Like, how might they go about? Because I like this idea of evaluating, reevaluating, kind of self-diagnosing. So, how would they go about that scenario?
Awesome, Tom. I do have the benefit that this podcast is going to be posted and I'm going to be watching and listening for different things, which are the questions that I didn't answer like I was prepared for this conversation with you, Tom. It's a
Hmm.
podcast, but I'm sure that I would have different levels of preparation. I would have an angle that I would have loved to bring forward that I
Hmm.
forgot. There's something I really wanted to say on this podcast today that I just cannot remember, right? But it is now my responsibility. If I want to show up as a person who can hold a meaningful, congruent conversation, what in this podcast episode do I need to do better in the next time? I have that benefit.
Hmm.
So if you are a candidate, one of the things that I did and do after I have an interview with someone, can I remember some of the questions and the ones that I got kind of struggle with? Again, to the point that I mentioned earlier, the phone screens can be over the phone.
Hmm.
Sometimes they cannot measure your energy. But how about the HR, the hiring manager, the panel discussion, which sometimes is going to be somewhere where people can see you? Can they see your energy? Can you bring your passion? Can you bring the whole person that you are to the team? Do you have experience in the therapy area? Again, I mentioned that with the HR screen. I mentioned that with the talent acquisition discussion, you may not really have the need to talk about all your scientific accolades and the achievements because that would be information overload. But as you start progressing in the interview process, you need to start thinking, how do I bring my value proposition, even whether I'm asked or not? For the people I mentor, coach, or guide, or peer mentor, I tell them that an interview for you as a candidate, an interview is an opportunity for you to go and tell them what you hope to tell them, irrespective of the question that they ask you. So if I want to come to this interview and tell Tom, I am good at communication, I am good at relationship building, I am good at large group presentations, I don't need to wait for a question to be asked directly. You can mesh all of that, right? You can mesh all of that into how you tell me about yourself. You can mesh all of that into how you problem solve, right? So sometimes candidates go to interviews, their key strengths they are waiting to display, and they are waiting for a question that goes along the line of tell me about your strength. Sometimes they don't ask you that, but
Hmm.
you want to mention, you want to find an opportunity in that interview to showcase your strengths, to showcase some of the things that you have accomplished in life and some of the things you struggle with and how you hope to develop those. So those are the things. So again, the energy needs to be high, the passion needs to be visible. And when it gets to the hiring manager uh, panel interview level, you really need to bring your science with you. Whether you're asked directly or indirectly, you need to find a way to weave it to make them understand this person has a good value proposition that he's bringing to this team. So just different things, mastery of science, of storytelling, scientific storytelling is important. Do you have expertise or passion or a story relevant to the therapy area? Are you familiar with the pipeline for the company? They don't need to tell you that, but you cannot come to an interview and seem to not know what the company is working on. So those are things to consider. Again, it's all about stepping back and examining your life. You don't want to live an unexamined life.
And let me kind of take a step back and say that this isn't an exact science. When you take a step back and when you're in examining and diagnosing and doing all these things that George and I are talking about, it's not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be a little messy. There's going to be guesswork. A lot of this is going to be based upon how did you feel about a certain, like you said, George, when you don't feel good about a certain answer to a question, well, you probably didn't, that wasn't your best answer. So just remember that, and that's what you work on for the next time. The question that I asked about what happens if you get through and you get to the hiring manager, maybe even a panel interview, and then, it gets stalled or it doesn't move forward. Well, I can't say that you're going to find out for sure. You may never find out. You may have just gotten beat out by somebody that has more experience or might just be a better fit for the role. It might not be anything about you specifically, it might be about somebody else or something else. So give yourself some grace. As we're talking about this, I don't want to overwhelm you with this task of trying to figure out, okay, Tom and George said, find out all of your rate limiting steps. Guys, this is an exercise of doing your best to position yourself for the next time and to get yourself better prepared. Maybe you re engineer your approach a little bit to get the momentum back. So, George, let's talk about that. Let's say we get to that point, right? So, someone gets to the point where they've gone through the process a bit, they're starting to identify and understand some of their limiting steps and some of the things that they need to improve upon. How do they go about this re engineering to make themselves better for the next time?
Yeah, and Tom, thank you for at least adding something to what I said earlier. I tell candidates sometimes it is not about you, it's maybe about the pool of competition you're in. So
Hmm.
I've had people I work with to get a role and they didn't get it. I said, just wait until you see who posts on LinkedIn that they got the job. It does two things. It helps you to realize that there was someone a little more competent than you are. Because if you and I, you're an aspiring MSL, you apply for a job, someone who got the job had 5 years of experience, then you take the blame away from you. So you don't need to fix anything. It's not every time we need to fix anything, but that, like Tom, you rightly said, there is another candidate who kind of was better, had more experience. So that is really something that I'm glad that you highlighted. I am just sitting here. When I used to be when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time reading about different scientists, and some of their quotes stick with me. And humble me in the approach I take for life in my life. There is this physicist called Niels Bohr, and one of the things he said was that an expert is a person who has made all the mistakes that can be made in a very narrow field. So, if you're an aspiring MSL, if you're an aspiring MSL, you can become an expert aspiring MSL by making all the mistakes and tabulating them, right? We don't want to ignore the mistakes we have made. These are all the things that help us to grow and develop to get the role and maybe to advance in it. So really those failures and those missed opportunities are not an indictment. It doesn't describe who you are and how you can accomplish, whether you can accomplish anything. So there are really different ways that you can come back. Um, if you've had some setbacks. Tom, your question was maybe I took a tangent and I forgot. What was
Re
the question again?
once you identify some of these things that need to be fixed, how do you re-engineer so that you can gain momentum and prepare yourself for that next go?
Yeah, I identify that all my resumes come back to me the next second with a rejection. Then I know that that's my rate limiting step. I don't have the best resume.
Hmm.
What can I do to fix the resume? Am I going to ask a chat GPT? Am I going to reach out to a trusted FAMD who is already an MSL and say, even if you don't have time, can I see what a good MSL resume is? There a template somewhere? I know the MSL Society used to have a template when I was applying that shows you the key things that could be included. If that is your rate limiting step, if you speak with hiring managers or go to panel interviews and you do not get the role, and that happens several times, and you feel like you need to figure out, then you can practice interviewing with other people. You can have other trusted people who can give you feedback on your interviewing before you go for an interview. So I have an interview coming up. My dear friend, your dear friend, and my dear friend Sarah Snyder, she has a special place in my heart because when I was applying for my first MSL job, the one I got, I just reached out. I have an interview in the next 3 days. I just need an expert to give me feedback. And she said, go ahead, you do great. After she did that, I went and I did that. So there are many people who would be able to look to look after your work. So it's just now taking a step back, understanding what that challenge was, then look for the right solution. Just depending on what that step you're missing is.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we've been talking about aspiring MSLs mostly in this conversation, but does this affect MSLs that are already experienced or any other experienced medical affairs professionals in their
Yes,
career?
it affects me. It affects everyone. It affects people who are accomplished, right? So it is something that we all need to continue to work on. I'm an MSL now, senior MSL. When I was an MSL, the goal was to become a senior MSL. How do I become a senior MSL? What do I need in order to become a senior MSL? There either could be things in that process that I didn't understand that I need to fix in order to get to the next. So it affects everyone. Do I understand why I have this job in the first place? I bet you there are many MSLs that I've had conversation with them. I say, if someone asks you, why do you have the job you have? What will you tell them?
Mm.
Why does your company need you? I mean, they are my peers. They are already MSLs. But some people still cannot really make a good value proposition for why they do their jobs, right? So we all have things that we're working on, which we may not be aware of. And that's why we need either mentors or lean in when we have internal meetings to understand where we are. So yes, I would say we are all works in progress claiming to be finished goods.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you just said, you mentioned a couple of times you mentioned like the word value proposition, which I talk about in my book a lot. Um, and I think, but basically what that means is what makes you valuable? Why are you valuable to an organization? You should not only know that, you should leverage it. And that's something that if you don't fully leverage or have an understanding of, you're probably shortchanging yourself and the company because there's more that you can offer. So and you want to lean into that. Like you want to know what you need to lean into. I think that's part of this whole conversation. But getting back to, and this could be for whether it's an aspiring MSL, an MSL, an MSL leader, once you identify some of these issues, or you really truly understand your value, whatever it is, what is that? Because the title says catalyzing what matters. So how do you catalyze what matters? Can you talk about that process?
Yes, I think I already mentioned it without saying catalyzing what matters. So I send again, I like the classic case of I've sent out 200 resumes, I've never heard back from anybody, right? So start spending time trying to connect with more people on LinkedIn and trying to have time with them. Put your catalyst on the thing that matters, which is your resume. Are you going to get resume templates that you can help to build? And once you build a good resume, it speeds up the process for you to advance to a next role.
Hmm.
Are you struggling with visibility when you're an MSL now, you've done your job, but no one knows how to do it? How do I get this? Is it a matter of where to document, how to have meetings or conversations with your leadership, or do you just need a mentor, a coach, right? Because you could be doing a phenomenal job, but if you don't know how to present the work, no one knows. Where do people go to get information? Who are the advocates that you have around you? When I come into a new organization, I need to know how is this organization structured? MSL, senior MSL, executive, principal MSL? Do I need to go now that I'm a senior MSL, look for a mentor who is an executive MSL and say, in this organization, what matters? How do I show my work? I'm in the field, I'm doing all of this stuff. No one is checking where I'm flying to. How do I show my work? And that applies to aspiring MSLs, that apply to established MSLs, even people in other roles. So it's a combination of one, stepping back. What do you want to accomplish? What do you know in that process that you can accomplish? I know that I can be good at an MSL, but maybe I need a bit of advocacy. I know that I'm great at the work I do in the field. Maybe I need to collaborate a little more with my peers so the word can go out about my work. It is really different for different people, but just having the concept of rate limiting step and that there is something called a catalyst somewhere that you can use to speed up the entire process. I think that's kind of the important part of this conversation.
Yeah. And then last question. So what happens when you start making these changes? Like, how do you know what's working? Do you continue to reevaluate? Talk about this process, like on the ongoing.
Yeah, very, very easy. We we focus, say if we're focusing on aspiring MSLs, are you now having more hits when you submit an application, right? So for that person who has never had a recruiter or an HR person call them about a job they applied for, are you now starting to have them? For that person who has gone to one or two interviews, have you had a case where they even reached out to you and say, you were a very phenomenal candidate. We would have gone with you, but we just had another person. Because when a hiring manager really identifies potential, some of them are good and kind enough that they don't want you to go deflated, even if you don't get the job.
Mm.
How are you showing up? How are you conducting your one-on-one meetings when you reach out to people on LinkedIn and ask for time? Is there any track record you have of repeat meetings with the same people? Because networking is not me meeting with Tom once. Networking is me keeping a consistent relationship with someone. I have people who have reached out to me once. We talk for 5 minutes. I don't think they're sitting somewhere assuming that we are really, really connected because I cannot tell or defend their stories anywhere, right? So it's really a lot of things. What do you struggle with? If you do not understand what the MSL job is, there are free resources. This podcast is a great resource. The MSL Mastery, the program you're running with my dear friend and mentor, Sarah, it is an opportunity for people to optimize where they are lacking. If you're working already, um, what are the changes that are working? You're getting different feedback from your leadership. You're getting your name said in rooms where you're not sitting just because you've built advocacy, mentorship, and sponsorship. These are all little metrics that can help inform progress in one direction. But again, your responsibility, what do I lack? Who do I need on my team? And how can they show up for me?
Amazing advice. That like literally summed up the whole conversation. I just think that this is an ongoing thing that you guys really can't just go through the motions. You have to do a continual kind of a continual review, look under the hood and kind of see what it is that needs to be fixed and then figure out how to fix it. Go find somebody that can help you fix it. There's so many different tools and resources available, and there's always somebody out there that has the answers to the test. You just have to look for it. And we, again, you mentioned our program. We have had a lot of success in helping people. So that's one example. There's ChatGPT. There's all these other
Yes.
things like there are resources available, and thankfully there's guys like George who's been a good mentor to a lot of people. We do this podcast, it's free. You can get a lot of information in places like this. So, George, as always, you're the man. I appreciate you spending some time. This was an awesome conversation. And listen, man, you know you're always welcome back.
Yeah, and thank you again for having me. And thank you for listening in. I would love to close this with a quote from Adam Grant, who is one of my favorite authors of all time. And he says, it takes humility to question our past commitments, doubt to question our present decision, and curiosity to reimagine our future. So I challenge all of us to have that curiosity, no matter the level of expertise and accomplishments we have enough curiosity to be able to reimagine the future plans that you have. Again, thank you, Tom. Always excited to be here.
Boom. There it is. George, you're the man. Thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with others. As always, thank you for your support of this podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.